Peg? Are you muted?
Jump in and
I
then.
was muted.
Oh, there she is. Go ahead.
Yep, I was muted. Thanks, Matt.
There we are. Go ahead. So.
Yep. Are we good? Okay, I'm Peg. I'm a food safety specialist with WMEP.
Go ahead.
Do we have a delay here, maybe?
I think Matt
Go ahead, Jesse.
Go ahead, Peg.
Go ahead, Jesse. Okay, are we ready?
Yep.
Okay.
Go.
I'm Peg Dorn, a food safety specialist with WMEP. I've worked predominantly with food companies in the quality role. I do food safety certification and other things, and I've recently started working with the certification team. So I'm going to throw it over to Jesse.
Thanks, Peg. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jessie Servi-Ortiz. I'm the Managing Director of the Wisconsin Sustainable Business Council. So we're an affiliate organization to WMEP, and our arm sort of works solely on helping businesses with sustainability, but more through programming than through consulting. We've got a big conference coming up that Wayne's speaking at, so thanks, Wayne. And I'm really here today to be tech support for Mac, to run Zoom behind the scenes. So if you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask. If you have, you can also use the chat. I'll watch the chat if you have questions, and I can interrupt Mac. You should be able to see his screen just fine, but if you want to put it on speaker view or gallery view, it's up to you. And it sounds like most of you are used to using Zoom. So I think that's all from me. Mac, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Just quickly, let's run down through the team. And if you wouldn't mind, just to make sure that I understand who the participant, Peg and Jesse understand who you are and where you are in the organization. And we know that you're on the sustainability team. That much you don't need to repeat. So maybe just give us a sense for who you are and where you are in the organization. Maureen?
Okay, good morning. You guys know I'm Maureen Wolberg, and I'm the corporate HR specialist. So I have been kind of helping Wayne and Mac sort of coordinate with all of our team members at Birchwood Foods to put together the sustainability initiative.
Wayne?
Hi, I'm Wayne Waking, Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Birchwood Foods. Really, I'm the one that, along with Maureen, we were the initial starters of this project, initiators of this project, driven a lot by our customers. And obviously, as we go down through it, it's the right thing to do. And I've leaned on Mac a number of times here because we're getting inundated with this stuff. I just got one from him last night. So I appreciate that, Mac. That'll be the template for me to use going forward, I think. That was a pretty in-depth request. So I'll take time to read that later.
It was, and we may even have a brief opportunity to chat a bit about it. Josh?
Josh Uhas, representing the accounting/finance department. And I think we've had probably a couple calls already, Max. So I think I kind of got the gist of what's going on.
Okay. I've got a couple of phone numbers. I think that may be you, Peg, but I've got a 262 that ends in 272. Is that you, Wayne?
That might be Wayne.
Okay.
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah, Roger, go ahead.
I'm Roger Krantz. I'm with Birchwood Transport side of the business. I'm the fleet safety manager over here. So
Cool. Krista?
Krista Heinzen. I'm in marketing and project management with the sales team.
Jim?
Hello, Jim Caps. I'm with the IT team.
Looks like you're muted, Jim.
Oh, Jim Caps. I'm with the IT team. Am I muted? I'm not muted.
He's not muted. I can hear him.
I can hear him.
Yep. Okay. Yep. Yep. You're okay, Jim. Yep. We got you. And Mark?
Mark Seifert with Food Safety and QA, and with Andrew and Wayne, get on a lot of these calls with our customers. That Wayne mentioned these requests that have been coming in. So Been working a lot with those two, and interested to see what you have here that we can lean on.
Okay, Nicole?
Nicole Kivo, I'm the MRO buyer. I handle a majority of purchasing for that area of the organization. I dealt with sustainability at my last company, so I got roped into this. And I'm happy about it, I really am.
Okay, guilt by association. All right, so just for the benefit of everybody, I will gladly reactivate my video feed, but just in the interest of bandwidth and keeping things flowing, I'm gonna deactivate my video camera when I get an opportunity to do so here. Just real quickly to start everybody out. We're going to talk just a bit about sustainability, what it means to Birchwood Foods. We're going to go rapidly through the the metrics that form the foundation for what Birchwood is after, and understand what's material to the organization. We'll talk about what's going to be your primary focus as a team, at least initially, and that is communications and getting a concise, or relatively concise and reliable statement on sustainability. We'll talk about the metrics. We'll talk a bit, not a lot, but a bit about engagement, and then we'll wrap things up after that's done. So here very quickly is an outline or our agenda for the day, starting today, getting through these introductions by 9:15 and the basics. We'll talk about team operations for about a half an hour, materiality, introduce what it is and how it works, how it relates to the team specifically. Communication, we'll spend a bit of time on that given the relative focus that communication will have initially, talking about the material metrics for Birchwood, and then winding up with the engagement piece at the end. So I would encourage you over the course of the presentation to interrupt if there are questions. And as Jessie mentioned, she will be monitoring the chat line just to see what's going on in terms of questions that you might have that you may not be able to get in by unmuting yourself. So just a quick check, anybody having any difficulties seeing or following what's going on the screen right now? Okay, I'm seeing head shaking, so looks like we're good to go. So I'm going to escape out of this for just one real second, and one quick second, and I want to make everybody aware that there's more information that's available to the sustainability team than just the training information that's involved. And the information that is available is in a file folder that Maureen has access to. And this information is stored out there, and it's thinking for just a moment. So for each one of the topics that we cover, there is a full file folder worth of information that's available to you as a sustainability team and to everybody else. So all of the material metrics and all of the basic information is out there. If we go to the administration file and look in the team training folder, for every single one of the topics that we cover today, there's a reference and resource sheet. Within those sheets, and I'll stop because communications is one of the most important things, but you'll see every one of the topics that we're going to cover this morning has a sheet associated with it. We'll pop on communications just to give you a quick idea, and each one of the topics has this same information. So what's the learning objective associated with the module that we covered? What are web and print resources that are available for some of the topics that we covered? As I said, there's a lot of information related to this. So when we talk about marketing and external communications, what resources are out there that we can use? What are the reporting trends? So there's a lot of information. There's definitions that may help as you get closer into developing communications. And then there's also a library of additional PDF resources that are available that you can simply request from WMEP. So I want you all to be basically aware that for every topic that we cover today, even though we're going to cover them quickly, there's a wealth of information out there about and additional resources that can be used as you pursue the various metrics or topics that we're talking about over the course of the presentation. So let's jump into this and just very quickly, this is a general definition of sustainability for those that may not have had some immediate exposure to that. And what it is the pursuit of business growth strategy that creates long-term company value by seizing opportunities and managing risks related to the company's environmental and social impacts. Generally, businesses are on a sustainability journey. You'll see on the screen in front of you, most organizations and companies in the country have been through the pre-compliance and compliance stage. They've accepted the fact that compliance is something that they have to do as an organization. And most organizations are starting to look beyond compliance as requirements for the organization. But where value is created inside of an organization is by taking sustainability and integrating that strategy into what they're doing as a business. And part of what we've done is integrating sustainability to the strategic business plan for the organization. And part of that's what's going to drive today's presentation. And ultimately, what you're looking for in an organization is purpose and passion. So sustainability as it relates to your organization is fairly important. We've done an analysis, and I'll show you that in just a second, but the important takeaways is 3 out of 7 of your competitors have a substantial sustainability presence, and 4 out of 7 have sustainability presence small enough that it could actually give Birchwood a competitive advantage as you get into that space. In the customer analysis, and these are customers that you identified, 9 out of 9 of your customers are actively engaged and interested in one or more elements of sustainability, and some of them a very deep commitment in sustainability. And the file folder that I showed you before has a customers and competitors analysis. So you can look through a whole library of information as to where do we sit as a company, where do we Birchwood sit as a company in relation to sustainable practice among our competitors and with those suppliers who may be looking for us for sustainable practice. And if you look underneath the customers portion of this slide, you'll see the various opportunities that are available for participation in in sustainable practice within the organization. So as you start your work as a team, this is a 10 elements checklist for you as a team. 1 is to start small. 2 is to hold regular meetings. 3, which you've already done by the structure of your team, which is to break down borders. You've got a multidisciplinary team coming together, each of you bringing a wealth of information. And there's also an encouragement here to even go outside of the team, involve building services and support staff in developing the products that are available. We've done some work to create for you a bit of a calendar, and we'll talk about that when we talk about the metrics. And we also encourage you, where there are projects that are out there, to encourage ownership of those projects, especially when you get into the specific metrics of water, waste, land resources, the employee health or employee safety and well-being. Those need owners in order to keep them going. Excuse me. Make it fun. And communication is going to be a key point. As you get deeper into this, you'll want to start thinking about creating satellite teams. And above all, and this seems to be a part of your culture at Birchwood, and that is to show appreciation for those who are involved. As we look at sustainability as an organization, we've been working with over 200 companies on various aspects of sustainable practice. What we notice is there needs to be a commitment. That's your true north. There needs to be metrics that matter. And in many organizations, they'll have to take some time looking at that. In your case with the sustainability team, the material metrics have been identified, so you won't, at least in the initial stages, have to spend a great deal of time doing that. There needs to be a code of conduct and ethics, on the notion of doing the right thing and saying it in simple enough fashion that people can internalize pursuit of sustainable action inside of the company. And then the ability to be able to talk about the impact and the actions that you're taking as an organization. And that is quintessentially important as Birchwood pursues its strategic business plan to be able to communicate sustainable practice. Remember, 9 out of 9 of your customers have some active material interest in sustainable practice. It has gone, in many cases, beyond a cost-only determination. And it's, I can't overemphasize that importance. And then the last piece is dynamic engagement, being able to work with your customers on an animal protein strategy, figuring out from among your suppliers, how do we make sure that we get the sustainability information from them and pursue projects that will make us as Birchwood a more sustainable company. What is necessary in any organization is to determine what's material to that organization. And we had extensive conversations with Wayne and Maureen in the early stages, and both had done a fair amount of homework to say, all right, what is it that we're going to look at? And what you have in front of you, and I'm not going to read through all of these, we'll talk about them in detail when we get to the metrics session, but the team is not going to have to determine, all right, what metrics do we want to measure? The ones that matter have been identified, and they come from 2 sources: the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef and the Sustainable Accounting Standards Board, or SASB. So USRSB or SASB are the sources for the 2 major metrics that are involved. So given that the metrics that have been identified, given starting with the end in mind and recognizing there are 5 things that we're going to want to try and do, and you're not going to want to try and do it all at once. Remember that first thing on your checklist: start small. So what I'm suggesting to you is, here's some things that I would suggest would be good fodder for a first meeting to start the team in terms of discussion. One is to talk about the commitment, and there is a commitment to sustainability at Birchwood. It's a modification of what is in the excellence statement for the company overall. And to visit that commitment statement and to think a little bit about, in terms of the respective perspectives that you bring to sustainability, what is it that you can help to contribute? What can I commit to do as a part of the team? Then to go through the metrics that matter and create a calendar, because remember, calendar was part of that checklist, for the ongoing fulfillment of identified material metrics for Birchwood. Of the 6 metrics for the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, to select 1 or more that you're going to try and get to the next level of performance. So create the calendar and then pick one or 2 or 3. Again, start small. And we've got a checklist that we've put together for you, and I'll show you bits and pieces of that as we're going through the session today. So the other piece is to start thinking about what are the impacts and actions that you have as an organization, and start the process of developing a common message that can be shared throughout the company, linked to the owners of the strategic business initiatives. Fundamentally important, this is the core focus that's been identified from the work that we've done thus far. If we're interested in accomplishing or enhancing our accomplishment of strategic business objectives, we need to be able as a company to communicate the work that we're doing on sustainability, not just about the strategic business initiative from a business only standpoint, just given the base of interest that exists in your customer base. And then start talking about dynamic engagement. Where are there opportunities to dynamically engage your supply chain? And just as, I'll let the cat out of the bag, in purchasing, they're already, just based on some preliminary conversations that we've had, starting to talk to some of your suppliers about additional sustainability information that can be gleaned. And the last thing that I would say is either prior to the meeting or at least as a result of the meeting, to at least have a basic discussion on the Green Team Guide, which again is in that resource folder for you that is out there. So there's 3 initial things that are in that reference folder that you'll want to take a look at. One is the reference sheets. One is the customer and competitor analysis, so you get a deeper sense for what's going on with customers and competitors. And then the Green Team Guide that we've supplied to you to help aiding in going beyond just what's in the first meeting. And there may be ideas in there that I've not highlighted here that are important to you as well. Let me stop there. Any particular questions at this point? Because we talked a little bit about what are the metrics and what's our checklist going to look like as a team, and what might we want to do for first meeting. And this is a suggestion. It's not etched in stone, but it's intended to give you a starting point as a team. So questions? All right. So the next piece is in a little bit ahead of schedule, which is good. And maybe we'll get done early. We'll see. So the question that every organization has to face in the conduct of business related to sustainable practice is to say, what is material to my organization? And that's a matter of determining, as it says in the definition before you, the importance or significance of something relevant to Birchwood Foods. And it might be in part based on what stakeholders think. And we've already set the stage for customers as an important stakeholder in this process and the relative importance that they ascribe to the risks and opportunities that are out there for you. Wayne mentioned earlier the increase in customer surveys and the increasing level of precision in terms of not just precision in the survey, but precision in terms of what they expect from Birchwood Foods in terms of actions that will result in a significant difference. There was a time that, and I would say this was probably 6 or 7 years ago, where they just wanted to know if the people in their supply chain were meeting the environmental regulations and had goals to get better environmental performance going forward. Now, I mean, you've got companies out there that either are customers or are potential customers that's saying, we want you to set a specific goal for greenhouse gas emissions based on this methodology. And until you get that goal set, we want you to report your progress towards getting to the point where you can set that goal based on this methodology. So I mean, there's some very precise demands. The survey that Wayne and I referenced just a bit earlier, they're specifically interested in water resources, efficiency and yield, in land resources, and mitigating impacts relative to biodiversity. So it's a very rigorous kind of expectation. And I was chatting with a company the other day, and for some of the companies that are now competing in European markets, 10% of their score when they're responding to proposals, 10% of their score is based on sustainable practice within their company. And I only expect that that's going to increase. So you all are a fundamental part of helping Wayne and Dennis and John and others in the organization be able to respond effectively to what customers are asking, because the bottom line is it can substantively affect your organization's ability to create value over the short, medium, and long term. Here's your sustainability statement. It's not that this is etched in concrete, but this is a clear starting point for the team. And this is the one that I was suggesting that you visit when you get together for your first meeting. And what we've done is simply introduce sustainability into the commitment for excellence that has been a long-standing part of the presence of Birchwood Foods. So you're looking for product that is responsibly sourced and sustainably produced. It does, and that's the umbrella under which the metrics that we identified earlier are going to be considered. So the next piece in the agenda is to talk just a bit about internal sustainability communication. And I'm gonna, as I go down through this, I'm gonna give you advance warning. I wanna pose a question to the group. If you had to say prior to today, what would we communicate about sustainable practice at Birchwood Food? And as of today, what do I think, as in you as individuals, we should start coming together around in terms of communicating about sustainable practice here at Birchwood? So we're going to take a few minutes, given the importance of this particular piece of the presentation. So before I launch into the nuts and bolts of this, let me tell you why this is important. Part of what we did with Birchwood Foods was to take the 9 elements of the strategic business plan and compare those elements to the 8 or 7, depending upon how you're counting them, material sustainability metrics that were identified through the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef and through the Sustainability Accounting Standard Board. And what we found is in every single one of those, there was a direct connection in some form or another identified by the owner of the strategic business initiative that could either enhance by virtue of pursuing a sustainability opportunity, or could enhance by virtue of eliminating a sustainability risk, the ability to accomplish a strategic business objective. The common core element of those discussions is we need to, as Birchwood Foods, be able to communicate with our customers and our suppliers and internal to our organization here at Racine Corporate and Transportation what sustainability means to Birchwood Foods. And because of that core common theme, the immediate charge to the Birchwood sustainability team is to take the information that you have now in terms of what you have done and are doing. What is the message that we want to communicate about sustainability at Birchwood Foods, both in metrics and in communicating the actions that we've taken and the directions that we're pursuing as an organization. So what are the elements that are likely to be a part of your dialogue as you go forward? This is really for you to determine, but we want to kind of give you a general framework to understand what it is that you can pursue as an organization. One is to have some information, quarterly updates. Doesn't say to executives, it says from executives. So how do we as a sustainability team start feeding in sustainability information along with an expectation as to how you can rely as a team on them to communicate information about sustainability within their respective parts of the organization. So you are an enabler of communication, not necessarily from the team. To give updates during regularly scheduled team and departmental meetings. So you working with the various parts of your organization that you represent to determine, all right, how are we going to present at least this initial information? We are a sustainability team. Here is what we are doing. And then also to use internal communication tools that you have. Newsletters, internet, company website, monitors, screens throughout the workplace. But those are the nice, pleasant ones. Okay, so maybe we don't have all of the electronic communications that we need. Where are the places that people would likely to be able to read information? And one of the more amusing ones that I had in companies that I've worked with was they actually put covered communication boards on the backside of bathroom door stalls. So as you were sitting, you had an opportunity to read some basic information about sustainable practice in the organization. Not suggesting you have to do that. I'm just saying, think creatively about where you have an opportunity to take advantage of having a captive audience. Through social media and gamification is another one. I've got an organization that makes active use of an internally accessible Facebook page that they use for communication with employees. And as I said before, reach them where they are. It may be in the bathrooms, it may be in the break rooms. You need to determine what's best in terms of where and when that communication is shared. And frankly, working with the strategic business initiative owners to get a sense for what they may need for their specific initiatives. And we've spent a fair amount of time talking with Marina as well about how to weave the information into regular HR and PR communications relative to the message that needs to be shared. So the one thing you don't want to do is to greenwash. And if we were sitting in a room together, I'd ask the folks to raise their hand who had, or at least were aware what the greenwashing is. And that's unfortunately, it means that either information is not 100% shared. In other words, you're not 100% transparent in what it is you're doing. We only want to communicate good things about the organization. We need to be clear that if we've got problems, where are they? How are we working to address them? And candidly, most organizations that are actively engaged in sustainable practice and looking back down in their supply chain are pretty adept at determining where people are being either disingenuous or overly optimistic about what it is that they think they can accomplish, and where it is that they're actually going to improve. and to be specific. That's why we've got metrics that have been identified for the organization and taken the time to develop the metrics, because the numbers are going to be what you consistently use over time to tell how you're doing. And don't get overly generalized. One of the things that I did over the course of last night, helping Wayne with the survey that he'd been given, was I looked at 2 organizations that are working on sustainable practice in the animal protein area, and there were organizations that I wasn't necessarily familiar with. But I visited both of their sites, and as near as I could tell, there wasn't anything that they were prepared at that point to tell me about what material impact they were having as an organization. I mean, there were lots of nice statements about what they were doing from a sustainable practice standpoint, but not a lot there in terms of what an external party could expect in terms of practice from those organizations. So be cautious of generalized statements. So as you start thinking about communications, what specifically can we communicate about what it is that we're doing? You've got great numbers on water. You've got good numbers on carbon. So how do we as Birchwood begin to leverage that information for use? And work is underway to consider third-party certificates. So that isn't necessarily something that you're going to have out of the gate, but something that you may want to consider as a part of the planning. So before I launch into what is a fairly important part of the communication piece, let me just pose a question to you specifically. And let me start with the first part. Coming into today, what was your sense? And if I don't get anybody that unmutes themselves and jumps in with an answer, I'll pose some questions to some folks. So in your sense, what is it you think you could or you couldn't have talked about in terms of communicating sustainable practice at Birchwood Foods?
Well, I guess I'll start out and try to break the ice a little bit, but I think some of the things when I first started out, I really thought about what we had was a one-page statement that ended up being nothing that we really were doing. And the eye-opening conversations as we moved through the people that we talked to and ended up with Mac on exactly what sustainability was. I look at it, as something as I guess I would say as you said, the recycling more than it, and you've told me it's really more about business and monitoring business and managing your business in a way that, in a sustainable way, you get credit for it. So that's the way I've shifted my mindset. And so it's helped me think about this in a completely different manner. It is a business practice that you get the sustainability credit with it in some ways.
Yeah, I would agree with Wayne. I think in the beginning it was very kind of daunting and intimidating, a lot of the science behind it. But as we kind of went through the process, it's just been having a much deeper understanding of, well, this actually applies to, I thought I was just going to be helping coordinating, but this actually applies to safety and HR and recruitment and all of the ways that we can bring this to my little area as well. So I think it's definitely been a journey and we're still learning a lot, but from where we were in last December, almost a year, it's night and day. I think I thought like Wayne, it was going to be, okay, we're going to do a recycling program. We're going to talk about LED lights, not how do we keep the business sustainable for the next 5, 10, 15 years, and all of the different aspects that we need to utilize.
If I can impose, Nicole, you come from a background where you've dealt in sustainability before. Maybe offer some observations if you are comfortable with where you were and where you are.
So I was in the maintenance group at my last job, and it was me and basically the maintenance manager that headed the sustainability team. So a lot of what we went after came from a maintenance standpoint, the low hanging fruit that we could get at, projects that maintenance could do. There were some water recirculation projects that we'd worked on, like you said, LED lighting. So it was very maintenance oriented, what we had done there. By the time I'd left, the program had been in place for maybe 5 or 6 years. And we hadn't even gotten to, like Maureen was saying, anything that had to do with safety or animal welfare. A lot of it was just resource savings, water, electricity, things like that. So I haven't been involved here at Birchwood in the team too much yet. So it's hard to say where we are now as compared to where I was then.
Okay. Well, obviously in the very nascent stages, since this is the first time the group, at least to my knowledge, it's the first time the group's gotten together. So anyone else? Let me stop there.
I just wanted to chime in for a minute just on the raw material piece. So there's a lot of initiatives that the industry as a whole is undertaking. And from Birchwood's vantage point and where we sit relative to our suppliers and our competition, we have to piggyback off of a lot of the things that are already being done. We need to be able to highlight some of those things, sort of with a broad brush to our customers. We could go out and develop our own set of sustainable initiatives on the raw material side, and then find out that we're eliminating 60% of our suppliers. So we have to be mindful of setting a bar, but the bar has to be consistent with what the industry is already doing. If we could put whatever standards we want out there, but if we end up reducing our supply base significantly, we might be very, very sustainable, but we're also not going to, we're a huge buyer of meat, and unfortunately fortunately or unfortunately, we're so big that we need virtually every supplier that we have. We have to find good reasons to qualify suppliers, but also good reasons that we would end up disqualifying suppliers. So from where I sit, it's a balancing act. Our focus has always been on the food safety side of it. We want to make sure that that our suppliers have things in place that are going to protect us as well as protect them. And we probably could figure out with some of those food safety initiatives how that also correlates with sustainability. But we have to be careful as far as the standards that we're setting, that it doesn't detrimentally impact our ability to supply our customers and to buy the raw materials that we need to buy.
Yeah, you raise a very valid point, Andrew, and I think it warrants at least a very brief side conversation. One of the things about sustainable practice is that it does ask you, frankly, it demands the consideration of not just the environmental component associated with it, but the economic and social ramifications that are associated with it. You can't, in isolation, say, we're going to do X with antibiotics, recognizing that there may not be an appetite for that degree of performance in the marketplace, or we're going to do Y and in relation to the level of carbon emissions. I mean, somebody may look at Birchwood and say, well, we need to get to net zero carbon emissions. That's a tall task from an economic standpoint, and it emphasizes the importance of the sustainability team creating the message. And your message may very well be, depending upon how the team comes together and how you decide to tackle it, because you want to recognize the market forces, but you also want to try and move the market along from a leadership perspective as well. So yes, it does need to be responsive. You do need to consider the economic consequences, but you also want to try and place yourself in a leadership and differentiation role. No one suggests, I always tell folks, if it ain't profitable, it ain't sustainable. And cutting out a third of your, or even 10%, it sounds like, of your supply base would be somewhere, if not suicidal, certainly detrimental to the organization. But figuring out how to position yourself within the industry in order to be in a position to lead and to be in a position to work in collaboration. Remember the fifth element of where we're going, which is effectively engaging with stakeholders and being able to work with them in order to accomplish objectives that may relate to the more sustainable practice on animal protein. So as you look going forward, just as a general committee member, what would you like to be able to say about sustainable practice at Birchwood? Let's hear from some folks that we haven't heard from. Roger, can you start us off? Because I know you've thought about this.
Well, I do a lot of thinking. From my standpoint, most of it's probably from a transportation side of thing.
That's fine.
Altogether, but one of the things, to Andrew's point, we have to be extremely cautious with our decisions when it comes to vendors, and that no place would rear its ugly head any more than transportation. Our nation is in an extreme crunch for transportation, but yet, although I think the big long-nosed Peterbilt rolling in here with a 48-foot spread axle is cool looking, I know in my heart that it's not the most efficient way to get our product here. But if we can't get our product here and can't get it out, once again, to your point, if you can't deliver the product, then you're going to go broke pretty fast. The same would, when we talk about maybe retention, for instance, from my standpoint in transportation, retention is absolutely paramount to the success of Birchwood Transport, and probably most definitely to any of our vendors. It's probably something that's overlooked here, not just here, but overall. Keep advertising. And Maureen gives me a great perspective, a little bit differently. It's helped a lot, but we can continue to have a great hiring program, but if we don't have a great retention program, then we're spinning our wheels. And I think the same would apply to the plant, probably in a much larger number. So as I'm sitting here listening and thinking about what I thought sustainability was about, I'm focused on smart way information and all that carbon footprint and greenhouse gas and all that kind of stuff. And basically, I'm just kind of learning it's a way larger monster to deliver, one that needs to be delivered to remain competitive in the market. And like you said, tout your horn a little bit about what we're doing and how we're going about it. So you can see I got a lot more to learn. I can see that.
And I'm going to encourage everybody on the team, don't be intimidated by this. Let me just do a quick shift here. Krista, I'm going to call on you in just a second to ask you, all right, what would you like to be able to say about sustainable practice at Birchwood? And before I get to that, to say to every single one of you that there's probably even more to sustainability than what's reflected in those material metrics. I mean, the notion of what you have to communicate about and where you need to look initially, Maureen and Wayne and others that we've engaged in the early stages have pared that list down. So you could be talking about governance structures, engaging at the community level on various initiatives. Those aren't necessarily part of what you're looking at. You're looking at 6 very precise sets of performance and metrics associated and programs associated with those from the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, and 2 very precise components of the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board. So you don't have to immediately look at the very broad piece. So that said, Krista, what would you like to be able to say about sustainability at Birchwood Foods?
You know, I'm kind of with Roger right now. Like, I really had no idea what this all was going to involve. So I'm still kind of learning what we're all going to like accomplish with this. And I've been working with Wayne and Maureen a little bit with our social media accounts and stuff. And, you know, we're trying to put stuff together so we can present, you know, this out there so that everybody can kind of understand, you know, how our company is and feels with all of this and whatnot. So I'm still kind of learning, I guess, as far as, but I'd like to, you know, come out of this a little bit more knowledgeable because I really had no clue what any of this was going to entail. And they were kind of like, hey, you want to be on the committee? I was like, sure. So, to be honest, I kind of got a little thrown into it, which is fine. Because, you know, I'd like to be able to do more than just, you know, what I do on a daily basis here, you know. So, you know, I'm kind of in Roger's boat where I'm kind of just learning and seeing what all this is about. So I guess I don't have anything in particular that I want to, you know, have accomplished out of this, but.
So let me just summarize what my takeaways were from the various pieces of feedback. Number one, I've heard at least expressed in a couple of different ways. There's more here than what I would have thought initially. And my challenge to you is to say, all right, where are the opportunities that we have as an organization to talk about either what we are doing or what we have done that makes us a sustainable company? How do we portray ourselves as a responsible business doing things that are available for sustainable practice? How do we capture and tell the story about things that may have happened for different reasons, but have a clearly sustainable impact in the organization? We were pursuing cost savings as it related to packaging, efficiency as it related to suppliers inside of the organization. And oh, by the way, what we're doing, the story that we have to tell, is how this has made us more sustainable as an organization. And your initial statement may simply be that we recognized a need to be responsible to you as customers. And these are the sustainable areas of sustainable practice that we've identified where we would like to work with you in the future. Storytelling is probably the best way to do that. And I can't imagine a more enjoyable task out of the gate than having the responsibility to be able to tell a story. And the proverb is up in front of you. Tell me a fact and I'll learn. Tell me the truth and I'll believe, but tell me a story and it will live in my heart forever. So talking about those things that you're doing for sustainable practice and the people in your organization who are doing them. It can be employee stories, it can be ethical success stories, and it can be stories about your supply chain. I can tell you flat out that there are, my apologies for the cuckoo clock in the background, by the way, for those of you that picked up on that. There is already considerable work that's going on in the supply chain. There is already work that Charlie and Rick have done in order to effectively, and Dennis too, in order to effectively manage water as an organization. There are things that you are doing as an organization, across the organization, to manage energy and reduce your greenhouse gas footprint, Roger mentioned SmartWay and the greenhouse gas footprinting associated with that. The work that's being done on LED lighting that we talked about earlier. So it's finding a way to, what are the really good stories that we have to tell? Because remember, you can give your customers all of the metrics that you want. You can put them out in the marketplace, but what's going to live with them is the story that you tell about your organization and the work that's being done to pursue sustainable practice. And I would encourage all of you, don't get distracted by the survey and don't be survey driven. You know, how many boxes can I check on the survey form? Be cognizant of the fact that you need to tell your story about sustainable practice in a way that differentiates you from your competitors and in a way that effectively engages you with your customers. I mean, Andrew very pointedly relayed that it's going to be the active engagement across the industry that's going to get you the kind of change that you need in the animal protein area, and put yourselves, by virtue of the stories you tell, out in the front of that particular action. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the questions here, but I will encourage you as you get to that first meeting and you start talking about that initial charge that you have as a group to develop communication for the organization, to use these questions to help guide you in crafting the sustainability story for Birchwood Foods. Yes, you are going to have to develop a calendar. We talked about that earlier on in the process of the various metrics that we're about to go through. But having said that, that is kind of base performance. What's going to have the enduring quality for you is being able to talk about sustainability as an organization. So as you develop your sustainability story, when you consider that agenda piece to start developing it, here is a suggestion that I had for you to use when you tackle that part of the suggested first agenda, which is developing the communication. Brainstorm what your communications needs are, what and to whom. Which of these needs are material? What's really important to your company? So where do we connect? From a business standpoint to the strategic business initiatives, and what do we need to do in the organization? And it may be just the basic communication internal to Birchwood. Here's what sustainability is. We were all surprised as heck that it was more than what we thought it was. So here's what we're going to focus on as a part of what we're doing at Birchwood Foods. And in offering the invitation, if you have an idea, please go ahead and suggest it. And then based on these two pieces, the brainstorming on the needs, determination of materiality, to pick one or two, maybe three, that you can start to craft the story and use the questions to guide crafting of that story. So we're going to, we're going to start down through the metrics. This is going to be a forced march. I'll apologize in advance. We need to cover each of the metrics that are going to be important. But before I leave that, given the relative importance of communication and the need for the team to come together to create a message or messages surrounding sustainable practice at Birchwood Foods, and we'll give you the foundation for that in just a minute. Are there any questions or observations? Okay. So if you remember the agenda, there's a series of metrics that we're going to go through. Just as a recap, we're going to talk about water. We're going to talk about land resources. We're going to talk about the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef calls it air and greenhouse gas emissions. I'm going to give it a little different title. I'm going to talk about carbon, energy, and transportation. We'll talk about efficiency and yield, and then we'll talk about industry leadership and your role in animal health and welfare and well-being. Those items are the 6 that make up the 6 material metrics from the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef framework for sustainable practice for packers and processors in the beef industry. And just to give you a bit of background, those 6 metrics have, in most cases, 3 levels of performance. And what WMEP and WSBC have done with Birchwood Foods is to assure that there is documentation and information and goals in place to satisfy at least level 1 for all 6 of those metrics. And that's what we're going to talk about now is, all right, what are you doing? What do you have to do? And what may be in the future as it relates to the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef framework for sustainable practice among packers and processors. And then we'll talk a little bit about food safety, which comes from the SASB, or Sustainability Accounting Standards Board metric. And that's a pretty straightforward expectation. Interestingly enough, not a part of the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, but one that was identified as important. And then employee safety and well-being, which is a part of both SASB and the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. And the last piece, which is recruitment and retention, which is not specifically identified by either of those, but just based on our initial discussions, a very significant issue for Birchwood Foods, to which we hope some resources get dedicated and some further analysis to use sustainable practice as a way to improve on both the recruitment and retention fronts. Peg, is there anything that you want to do for basic introduction before we launch into the specifics on the metrics?
No, I think you covered that pretty well. That is coming from SASB and the Sustainable Beef Roundtable. So no, I think that's good.
All right. So just maybe one other overarching comment. There are probably, I would say, at least a dozen different frameworks that are out there that are either directly related to or indirectly related to sustainable practice in the beef industry. SASB, U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, Walmart through the Sustainability Consortium has a framework, and the list goes on. And I mentioned 2 of them earlier that I wasn't even familiar with until the survey came in from one of your customers. So they're out there in various forms, and the upside of all of this is you've got a very precise set of metrics to look at as you start your initial work. And you avoid one of the pitfalls that we frequently see in organizations is that they look at how much is out there and get distracted by the volume of information rather than the immediate focus on what's important. So as we go down through these are the ones that have been identified. Let me start with water. For those of you that are, born, raised, and indigenous to the Midwest, you hear the word water, and invariably there's someone in the group that says, "Well, why is it an issue? We're on the shores of Lake Michigan. We don't really have to worry about water." What you see in front of you is a map that shows the relative risk. This is an optimistic scenario for 2030. What's the relative risk for water? And that's quality, quantity, access to water as a result of governance issues. And guess what? Look where you are, down close to that Chicago area, and you are in a medium to high risk area. Look out across the plains at the area where your supply chain is, and that color turns from medium to high risk to extremely high risk in terms of the relative challenges related to water as an organization. So it's considering water as a part of what they do. And the U.S. Roundtable was very much interested in figuring out what the risks and how those risks were managed for beef. What we've done at Birchwood is to identify a water management plan for the organization, for the site, and identified what the relative risks or opportunities are and what the action targets are for the organization. If you remember back to when I started this morning, there's a folder out there that has the information, and it has the water management program for Birchwood Foods that was developed to be consistent with the International Water Stewardship Standards. So it uses stewardship as a base, a recognized international framework, and has a series of actions that you're taking as an organization and calculates what the relative risks are associated with water. So you have a base of information which the committee will need to make sure is maintained over time. Charlie and Rick will own it, but the committee is responsible for setting up the timing and working with them to make sure that it's maintained over time. The U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef sets out what it expects for the water resources area. The items that are highlighted in yellow are potential opportunities for the sustainability team to manage practice. Excuse me, just one second. I need to get a drink. So what's not highlighted is basically done. The water management plan is done. The wastewater permit non-compliances are managed and are measured and managed. You're tracking discharge water quality, and are there goals set for continuous improvement? If you look on the right side of the screen, you can see that there are goals and processes in place to meet what those goals are. Are there any questions on land resources? So when you set your calendar is to set to keeping going on the things that are white. And as you look at the metrics that are out there as a team, to consider those things that are in yellow. Is this something that as a team we would like to focus on? So questions? All right. Next one is land resources. So this one at level 1 says, does the company have initiatives and or explore opportunities to mitigate land and biodiversity impacts from new facility developments? The short answer to that question is you do. We've developed a checklist that can be used for major acquisitions, new construction, and modernization activities. And we also have a checklist that will be used by those that are doing capital expenditure requests to consider sustainable practice as a part of what's done. This particular element in the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef only has one level. And as it stands right now, the company does have a method for examining that. What you'll need to do as a committee is at some point, presumably after the capital expenditure requests are done or in concert with those that are managing the capital expenditure requests, to ask for an opportunity to either have a discussion or undertake some form of review to say, are we actually looking at the mitigation of land and biodiversity impacts as we're developing facilities? It has been set up in a way to leverage the capabilities of the architect you use as an organization and it has been set up to ask requesters of capital expenditure projects to make some fairly basic determinations about sustainable practice when they're requesting those capital expenditures. Any questions on land resources? So you're more of a shepherd on this one, not something that you would necessarily need to do, but in order to make sure that you're following, you need to have this as a part of your calendar. When should we take a look at this? And working that out as a part of your calendar of management for the team. So the next one is the one that I said, it's called the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, calls it air and greenhouse gas emissions. I'm going to tell you it's carbon, energy, and transportation that you're doing on this one. So there is a strategy in place to optimize energy efficiency. Maureen and Krista are the holders of at least the initial checklist of what needs to be done here. Hopefully I'm not putting you two on the spot here. Hopefully we, so there is some information as to what's needed to manage that. But the team will need to have this on the calendar and review the various contributors to this. Roger's going to be a contributor to it with his work on SmartWay. Rick's going to be a contributor to it with the work on LED lighting. Others may be a contributor to it if you start looking at, how things are getting to the facility from suppliers that aren't using your own transport. So there's a variety of ways that folks can contribute to this, but the basic in terms of an energy optimization plan is in place. There also is a methodology in place for the company's carbon dioxide equivalents. Josh and Roger are, at least at this point, the owners of that. We've developed the tools in order to run the initial carbon calculation. So you'll be able to calculate your carbon footprint as a company. And Wayne, help me out here. Is it once or twice that we've actually made use of that now in communicating with customers? Because I know the one that came in just asked for it, but I thought there was another one that had a carbon question as well, wanted to know if you knew what your carbon footprint was.
Yeah, I think, Maureen, I think it was Aldi's that is asking that question too.
Yes, yeah, Aldi. We've been a whole conference talking about the carbon emission.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's coming.
Yeah.
As a point of emphasis, if you look again down at the highlighted point of this, which is what can we do as a committee, where is an opportunity for us to make a statement? Take a look at 4.3.3a. Does the company make CO2 equivalents publicly available? So there's a very clear statement here. Are we going to be prepared to communicate about this? And it's embedded right in the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, let alone the connection to the strategic business initiatives. So, and then the other elements that are listed over time, setting and tracking emissions and goals. As Maureen mentioned, Aldi has some pretty specific expectations relative to greenhouse gases that may very well guide that discussion. And also an opportunity here for partnerships, initiatives, and programs that are out there relative to greenhouse gas emissions. Walmart has Project Gigaton. Wendy's has some programs underway where they're recognizing suppliers for greenhouse gas reductions. So there's opportunities here as well to say, how can we talk about this and how can we engage with our customers? For those of you that don't know, there are some basic greenhouse gases. This is just the information about those. Carbon dioxide being by far and away the biggest. Why is it important? Because it contributes to global warming. Yes, There's arguments about that, whether you agree with the global warming science or not. It's a business decision at this point. It's not one that can simply be ignored. You've got major customers that are out there that are going to be asking you questions about greenhouse gas emissions. Important to understand, from a greenhouse gas emissions standpoint, there are 3 levels: Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3. Scope 1 is what you directly do. In other words, when we turn on the gas heaters, when we burn fuel in our fleet, those are Scope 1 or direct emissions. Indirect is purchased electricity. It can be other gases that are purchased by the organization, the carbon dioxide that we use to cool our product. And then there's Scope 3, which is everything else. Do you need to have that indelibly etched in your mind? No. But for right now, anyway, your footprint calculation is based on Scope 1 and Scope 2. It does have a direct business value impact, and it's important to understand that. There can be physical damage in the value chain. There is a cost to what your carbon footprint is. Every time you see the word carbon, you should see a dollar sign, because it's either a gallon of fuel that's been burned or a pound of refrigerant that's been released, or at least a greenhouse gas refrigerant. Ammonia is not one of those, by the way. Or it can be some other collateral impact. There is supply disruption as a result of carbon related activity, and brand and product value can be created by virtue of how your product is perceived from a carbon standpoint. As I mentioned before, there are companies out there that 10% of their score is based on sustainability, and carbon is a major component associated with that. We'll talk a little bit more about the recruitment and retention piece when we get down to that specific element. Customer stability and growth. Is just as important to retain your clients and show that you're with them on the sustainable practice, and carbon is a part of the various customers that you have. Investor interest and cost of financing isn't as much an issue to you. We are actually seeing some litigation along the lines of carbon impact in organizations. You would be much less susceptible to that than other organizations with whom we deal. Questions on carbon? Normally when we would talk about carbon, we'd spend a good hour going through the various elements that are associated with carbon. So I'll apologize in advance if this seems superficial. It is.
I think one of the things I want to bring up,
I would encourage you to look at.
One of the things I'd like to bring up is I think this is one of the, I think when you go through the 6 or 7 measurements that we have, this one sticks out to you. And it is because we use the CO2 in our business today. It is our cooling mechanism to chill down beef. So it will be a challenge for us. And so just so you know, Mac pointed that out to me when we were going through that. And when we look at all of them in comparison, this one sticks out.
Yep, and thank you for saying that, Wayne, because it will be a challenge for you. And I think the team has an opportunity to help communicate the measure of challenge that will be, and the fact that this is not going to be a short term, we'll just go out and buy enough credits to offset this. Any other questions? Okay. The next one is efficiency and yield, and I will offer my observation that I give Birchwood incredibly high marks as I've worked with many facilities in understanding a very basic concept that the basic way to deal with waste is never to create it in the first place. And the measurement systems that you have in order to understand and manage waste in your major material product coming in, which is beef and packaging, is exceptional. And you have an opportunity here to communicate the measure of attention to and importance of the efficiency and yield associated with the company. It may seem, because of the amount of attention that you pay to it, passe, but I would encourage you to recognize it for what it is, which is a real strength of the organization that has a sustainability story to tell. What you're seeing is what's required from the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, and that's a program to divert waste from landfills implemented at the facility. I'll tell you, I think the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef missed the point, which is don't create waste in the first place. They're worrying about waste that's created at the end that's diverted from landfills, and I think the efficiency piece is really where there needs to be a heavy emphasis, and I would encourage you to make that the foundation of your story. I think you can tell plenty of good things. We have a waste management and diversion plan that's been crafted. Charlie and Rick and I are working on the final details of that. That program will need to be managed by or reviewed by or tracked by the sustainability team as you choose to do it. The areas, opportunities for you to engage, again, are highlighted in yellow and can be considered at the time that you look at what's going on. I will also say that as far as I'm concerned, I'll be very surprised if by the time Charlie and Rick and I are done editing that we haven't addressed what is required for level 2, because we're starting to get down to the point where we understand what exactly is being measured and managed, and can balance that off against the pounds of good output that are going out there. So the bottom line to this is waste, assuming you don't manage it on the front end, is a resource that's just in the wrong place. What you will see is a shift from the waste management hierarchy. The hierarchy that you see on the left is the roundtables, the same as the one the roundtable is using. I would discourage you from using that one in particular because I think it's too limiting, and the better hierarchy to take a look at is one that considers a more circular economy. The refuse, reduce, reuse that's on the right-hand side is the one that is a much better statement for where it is that we're going in managing resources. Here's the hierarchy that I would suggest that you use rather than the one from the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. And this is one that you can use if you decide to pursue goals and actions as was listed in the resource and efficiency hierarchy. And here is, for lack of a better term, an overly simplified list to say, all right, where do we actually have the opportunity to refuse to accept something that's simply going to be waste, or where might we be able to send waste that we're creating to energy? And there's already a project underway at Birchwood to do precisely what's listed in number 7. Don't know if it'll work out yet, but the actions are underway. So again, the foundation of managing what's going on, the waste management and diversion program does list the goals. And again, the sustainability team has the opportunity to talk about and add to or measure the impacts that are associated with those particular goals. I threw this slide in here just because it's important to understand as you do your work as a team, to understand where are we if we were to decide from a standpoint of where do we fit from good to great, and recognizing that there's some basic levels of engagement. What can we do to get better? How do we put ourselves in a leadership role? And the really exciting part, what are we doing to transform what it is that we are doing as a company from marketing and management standpoint? I mean, the whole notion of that e-commerce market that's out there has transformative potential in your business. So from a sustainability practice, from the standpoint of sustainability practices, it raises some incredibly interesting questions. So the team has the ability, should you choose to go down that path, to move from basic engagement, which is fundamentally important to your business and maintaining your customer base, that whole notion of starting to think in transformative terms about where we go as a company into the future and where we can have some significant impacts. Questions on resource and efficiency?
I think one of the comments I want to make here, Mac, is a term that I think you brought up, and I know Mark uses it. I'm hearing John use it more and more, is first-time quality. Making sure that what we do the first time, we don't have to go back, doing it right the first time, we don't have to go back and redo it. That really contributes to this. And so I think that's a measure as a business that we've got to start probably putting a little bit more focus on. And at least putting it out there so we know what it means. I think we know what it means, but we're not measuring it. I think there's a lot of energy that could go towards that we need to be monitoring. So just a comment on that from my perspective.
And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Peg to talk about animal health and well-being and food safety. And Peg, when you're just ready for me to move on, why don't you just say next slide, please, rather than worrying about shifting control of the screen. Work for you?
That works for me. I think that'll work best. So what you're seeing now is the requirements from the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, requirements for animal health and well-being. And as Max said early on, those things highlighted in yellow are what you want to concentrate on. Those things not highlighted are pretty much already done. So when you look at level 3, does the company track animal welfare over time? That seems non-intuitive to you guys because you don't slaughter, right? And you don't get involved in animal welfare. But your clients do, your vendors do. So the idea is to build a good relationship with your vendors to make sure that they are paying attention to these requirements. And that falls into the next one, participating in partnerships and initiatives. Next slide. Okay, food safety. What does food safety have to do with sustainability? Control of recalls, so you're not producing waste. Non-conformances, you're not producing things that you have to rework, things that you're going to put more resources in than you should have to. And you guys are very good at food safety. You are BRC. Can you go back go back to that one?
Yep, sorry.
Oh, no problem.
Inadvertently tickled my mouse.
So you are very good at food safety. You are BRC certified. You have a BRC audit every year. And those of you that were probably involved with BRC know that it was a big undertaking, and it probably involved almost every aspect of your business. And that's where I want to make a correlation between BRC and sustainability. It doesn't just affect one part of the business. It affects everybody. And a good sustainability program is going to be like a good BRC program where everybody's involved, every part of the business. You have a vendor control program. So through that, you're hopefully controlling waste in the supply chain, or at least getting some information on what the waste is in the supply chain. And you're requiring that BRC audits are done, or some other audit, SQF, are done by your vendors, and you're monitoring recalls. So next slide, Mac, please. So food safety. What we're looking for is a proactive measure for food safety as it relates to sustainability. And Wayne kind of stole my thunder, but that's okay, as far as doing it right the first time. First pass acceptance reduces waste from rejects and downgrades. So you want to make sure you're doing it right the first time. You're not producing downgrade. You're not producing rejects, because as you do that, more resources, more energy go into that product. So percent of first pass acceptance just fits with sustainability, and it's something that you're already measuring. So it's not something you're going to have to start doing out of the blue. It's something you're already doing, and it's just a matter of taking that data, discussing it as a team, and deciding where you want to go with that data. Next one. So animal welfare, again, this is a supply chain. What does it have to do with sustainability? Again, it's about producing waste. Unhealthy animals, it increases waste. Those resources can't be used the way they should be. So again, you don't slaughter, so what does this have to do with us? Your vendors slaughter. And what you want to do is build that relationship with your vendors to work together to have an animal welfare program. All right, next slide. You already have pieces and parts of a good animal welfare program. You have the supplier manual that your vendors read and they sign and they agree to comply with it. It requires your vendors to have annual animal welfare audits. I've sat in a couple of these audits. They are not that easy to pass. They're looking very specifically at the animals and how they're treated. So it's actually a very good measure. And you do track compliance of your vendors. Now, tracking compliance and having 100% compliance are two very different things. You're going to want to start out tracking, because someone brought up early on that having really stringent requirements in the beginning is just going to reduce your supply chain, and that is absolutely not what we want to do. We want to have the conversation, we want to build the relationship and grow together. And that brings me to antibiotic use. Again, that is affecting your vendor, and that's where you want to be a partner with your vendor on monitoring antibiotic use, and then over time building a strategy to measure it, to maybe reduce it, control it. And right now it's just a matter of starting that discussion with the vendors on what data they have and what data they don't have. So, next slide. So your measures for sustainability, your BRC audit. You do that every year. From what I've seen, you have very good results. So that's a good measure for sustainability. Supplier compliance with GFSI, whether that be BRC or SQF, that's something you want to work with your vendors. If they're struggling complying with those standards, you want to know about it, and you want to either be able to help or find them resources to help them. Your proactive measure, your first pass acceptance, again, that just makes sense, reducing waste. You have your protein supplier manual for your vendors, and that's for everybody, all your vendors to review and sign and agree that they'll comply with it. Third-party animal welfare audits for your vendors. Right now, I think that's going to be a fact-finding mission, just to see who you're getting information from, who you're not getting information from, and how best to work with those suppliers that aren't providing that audit. And then antibiotic use for suppliers. That's going to be a work in progress. I know it's a challenge. It's an industry challenge, but what we want is to stay with the competition, and we want to get ahead of where the industry is going, so we're ready when they get there. Next slide. I think that's okay. That's it for me. Any questions on food safety and animal welfare?
Oop, did I go the wrong way, Peg?
Actually, yeah, this is Andrew. I do have a question, and Peg, this would probably be for you and for Mark Seifert as well. Some of these initiatives that we're talking about, how many of these are being incorporated currently or plan to be incorporated in the future into a BRC audit that we're already collecting from our suppliers? I would have to think that some of this information is already being captured either directly or indirectly.
That's exactly right. A lot of this information already is being captured. It's just a matter of raising the visibility on it. In fact, I think the only thing that's not being captured at this point is the antibiotic information. Would you agree with that, Mark?
Yeah, the piece that I would say is open to some measure of improvement. I don't want to cast aspersions on anybody, because I think on this front you're doing most of what you need to do. But the notion of figuring out who hasn't done the required audit and what the protocol is to follow up with that that organization that's not supplying the required audit, and having some measure of determining how you might get that audit in the future and track it. So the notion of tracking it and following up is probably only thing right now that isn't being done. And I don't think you need to do anything more than continue to capture the information from BRC. Just be able to tell if anybody would say, well, how are you doing on the audits? Well, it's right here. It's in this system, and I'm drawing a blank on the system. I'd have to yield to Mark to correct me as to where that information is captured and accumulated. But I don't think you need to do anything in particular, as much as the sustainability committee needs to make sure, sustainability team needs to make sure that these elements that are in place now are still in place and can be advanced to demonstrate performance to meet the USRSB standard. It's not asking you to do anything different. And if you look in the folder for both food safety and animal welfare, you will see there's a table there that shows specifically what's being done, and you can use that as a checklist on your calendar. You know, for this meeting, we'll go through the food safety and animal welfare checklist. But we would recommend the institution of first pass yield, and on the food safety side of the equation, to have a proactive measure. And we would also suggest that you make sure you complete the loop on the requirement for audits and have at least a way for tracking overall and measuring it, and then a protocol to follow up where individuals are missing. Did that answer it, Andrew?
Yeah, I think it did. I mean, I'm just going to throw out a quick example, because we're actually in the midst of working on we'll say an animal welfare project for a customer. We've identified 2 large suppliers that actually have sort of an antibiotic reduction program. They've partnered up with certain feedlots that have those programs. So for us to move the needle on that, you know, we could end up doing a little bit more business with those suppliers and a little bit less business with somebody else, and be able to make a statement to the overall effect that, you know, we've increased our purchases by, you know, X% from, you know, packers that have active antibiotic reduction programs. That, you know, obviously if the goal is 0, we're not going to get there, but the industry as a whole is making strides in reducing that. And that information is readily available, whether it's specific to a supplier or just through a Google search. There's documents out there that kind of show antibiotic usage in livestock over the years, and where it is today versus where it was as recent as 5 years ago.
So you're on precisely the right track. Be opportunistic in your action and be strategic in your communication. And if you can get to the point where, as you say, you can buy a little bit more there, you're being opportunistic in the action. We know somebody that can help to get us down that path, and we're prepared to lead as a company to get us there, in as quick a fashion as we can. Yeah, I mean, you're going to hear from some of your customers that their goal is zero. Yeah, I sometimes sometimes I know that the sustainability people in organizations are not talking to the purchasing people in the organization. As a matter of fact, I only know of one company worldwide that's trained everybody who makes a purchasing decision in their company in sustainable purchasing practice. And that was Siemens, and they did that about 2 years ago. But as a general rule, I mean, you need to understand there's going to be a disconnect that you got to deal with. But to the extent that you can take an opportunistic action and communicate it strategically to the sustainability people, go for it. That's precisely where you're looking at to tell stories, not get overly wrapped up in the metrics, especially when you're dealing with something that is hard to achieve, like reduction in antibiotic use. Okay. Any other questions or observations before I jump in? We've got about 10 minutes left, which is precisely what we need. So here's the information on USRSB relative to employee safety and well-being. Birchwood Foods has got a good employee safety and well-being program in place based on both what SASB, or the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, expects, and also what the U.S. Roundtable for Sustainable Beef expects. You are essentially meeting, as an organization, what needs to be in place for levels 1, 2, and 3. As an organization, as a sustainability team inside of Birchwood, we have recommended, and I suspect that there will be some follow through on this, the longitudinal tracking and review of accidents and incidents. There's a really, really robust program for tracking and managing that at both the human resources level and at the executive level inside of the organization. But one of the things that's missing at this point is looking at it longitudinally over time and having some overall goals that are associated with this. Again, as with the prior ones relative to food safety and animal welfare, this is one that the sustainability team doesn't have to, certainly could if they decided this was an area that was one that they wanted to have some focus just from an engagement standpoint. But it's more a matter of checking to make sure that what we need to have in place for employee safety and well-being for SASB and USRSB is in fact there. So that's the piece that gets added to your calendar. So let me talk a little bit. I'm going to kind of mush together here the engagement and the recruitment and retention point. So what we're trying to get to is not only understanding what recruitment and retention cost Birchwood Foods overall, but to get to the point where we're actively engaging people. And The thing I love about this slide is the relative truth that goes along with it, regardless of the organization. I've yet to find an organization that this didn't apply in some fashion. And that is the development of employee skills and the concern, the risk that some organizations see that actually may prevent them from skill development because they're afraid of people leaving. And the notion that if we train people well enough, they can leave, but treating them well enough so that they don't want to. And this is a point that very, very frequently gets missed. And the notion that if we don't train them or we don't treat them well, what does it do to the organization if they stay? And it can mean that they stay for an amount of time that sucks up a lot of resources, but not long enough to make the material contributions to value inside of the organization. And what we're working on is considering the cost of a vacancy. What does it cost you not just to have the position vacant, but what to get them on board, to get them engaged, the education, the asset value of that employee, the notion of creating additional value by volunteering or contributing in other parts of the organization, contributing to the sustainability efforts, and then also the intangibles of the value to that particular employee by providing meaning, impact, and purpose for them as the organization. What are you doing and what are your employees doing every single day to make the world a better place? And it's not just the hamburger that's coming off the end that's contributing a dollar value to the bottom line. How are they helping you in terms of managing that efficiency so that the first pass yield goes up and we're anticipating where food safety issues could exist, where we're making a difference in terms of the water that we consume as an organization and our responsiveness to the community that we're in. Think about it from the vantage point. You all are in the business, you see the company day after day. What's your turnover rate? What's that costing you as an organization? And in terms of lost productivity, in terms of ability to meet customer needs, there are direct and material impacts associated with that. Here's a slide that hopefully will provoke some measure of thought, and that is nearly 2/3 of employees feel more loyal towards a business with purpose. And think back to that commitment statement that we made earlier. What's our purpose? Our purpose is to produce the best quality product, responsibly sourced and sustainably produced. Would you like to be able to pursue that 65%, or are you prepared as a team to step back and say, we're not going to necessarily worry about it? And why will they choose you when they're coming to an organization? After pay and benefits, deeper purpose is the most important factor when considering a new job. You just made a huge step as an organization in terms of equalization of pay with competing businesses in the area. I can tell you right now, if that's all you do, in a matter of time, generally measured in a year or two, your competitive position will be compromised. And in the consideration of purpose, remember that that is the deeper path to being able to get people to choose you. And 64% of the people will go the extra mile for an organization that has purpose. I could, if we had more time, I'd give you a very specific example of an organization that through the introduction of purpose went from an inability to retain staff over any period of time to an organization that has their employees actively contributing to the profitability, increased profitability of the company as a result of suggestions that they're making and steps that they've gone to make sure that they're fully staffed as an organization, recognizing the impact that it has. Here's where the demand for purpose comes in. I'll not go through all of these. If you think it's just the employees, guess again. Customers are going to be watching you for it. Other stakeholders are going to be looking for it. Regulators and policymakers see it, and it drives decisions about where regulatory pressure is applied. You don't have to worry about investors and shareholders, but remember that customer line up above. And 9 out of 9 of the customers that you asked us to analyze have sustainability as a key element, a purpose element in terms of the business decision making that they're going through. And balancing profit and purpose is always an issue. You can't just go out and, quote, do the right thing. It has to be balanced against the perception that employees have that not only are you doing the right thing, but it's to give them a safe and secure place to work in the process. Here's something for you to think about. And I still am amazed every time I see this. Sustainability leaders are 400% more likely than average to be innovation leaders. So if you set yourself up to be out in the lead in sustainability, there is a higher likelihood that you're going to be out in front on innovation. Is that coincidental? No. What the study showed back in 2013 is sustainability is a cause, not just a correlation for innovation where it occurs. So there's an untapped potential there that this committee has to release. Where to start in terms of engaging your workforce. So when you think of your communication message, make it personal. Remember, we talked about getting your senior managers to the point where they're talking about sustainability, managing the engagement, setting up your calendar, giving opportunities for employee innovation. Remember, we talked about expanding beyond just the committee. And you're not going to do this all in the first meeting, by the way. And aligning corporate social responsibility with the broader culture. How do you start drawing more people in and then incorporating it into the process? And you've already done that. Your first task is communication. Why is that? Because it's directly related to your strategic business plan. You're going to measure and track. You got to set your calendar up. You've got to figure out, okay, when are we going to be able to demonstrate all of this stuff? Because we need to keep our documentation and processes up to date in order to satisfy the metrics that we've identified from the U.S. Roundtable and from the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board. I can't overemphasize the last one, which is please, please, please have some fun with this. The sustainability organizations that we see that are most successful are the ones that are passionate and dedicated to fun. If you talk to the folks at Inpro Corporation, they will tell you about the bees that they have on site, that they maintain, and they sell the honey. It's a part of their sustainable practice as an organization. Big deal from the standpoint of overall global impact on climate change? No. Big deal in terms of what it means to the company and their story of who we are and what we do? Yeah. They're going to be way more likely to tell you about the honeybees and some of the other very personal things that they do at the organization that came organically to them as a part of their sustainability program than they are to tell you about what the total reduction was in their carbon footprint as an organization. They can still tell you that. They can go look it up somewhere, but the stories are the ones that they remember. So recognize what's out there and celebrate it when it happens. And that, the hour being 11 o'clock, as the cuckoo clock is telling me in the background, I'll wait for just a second. That is the long and the short of sustainable practice. So you've got a potential agenda for this first meeting that'll take you from the high level to the very granular, what do we need to do on a day in, day out basis. You've got resources and materials that you can go to expand your knowledge and depth. You have us as a resource to call and say, all right, here's where we're stuck. This is what we need to do. And you've got some, I think, very interesting, potentially very, very much capable of creating value for the organization that you can pursue over time. So Wayne, Maureen, any final comments that you would like to make?
Something I guess I want to do is MAC and WMEP have almost completed the Kenosha plant, the Kenosha office, Birchwood transportation. We've also engaged them to complete Norcross and Columbus. And I think, what are we targeting, Mac, to have those done mid-year, by mid-year, maybe April to mid-year, something like that of 2020?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have to do as much with them, given what we've done with Kenosha. But we're looking to start sometime after the first of the year. And I think it would be great if we can be ready by April. But if we go to June, I mean, we're going to take the time necessary to do it right. I don't want to do it over.
Yeah. So we're encouraged on what we've done, and it's going to be a great program. I want to thank everybody for volunteering. Sounded like everybody was willing volunteers, didn't it, to you?
It did. It did.
We do appreciate it. I know it's a lot. It is daunting, I think, in some ways. So I think this helped me a lot get my head around having this document, something for us to go back and really reference. But Maureen's going to be our leader on this. I'm going to be on the side, I guess, participating. And so Maureen, I'll throw it over to you.
All right. Yes, thank you everyone for coming today and for kind of making some time in your schedule. So I just want to let everybody know the documents that Mac has been referencing. Steve, I spoke with him earlier about setting up something in the public drive. So I'm just following up with Jim later today, and we'll start downloading all of that material so everyone will have access to it. So that should be in the public drive. Once it's all there, I'll just send out an email confirmation to let you guys know the title, but it should be accessible to everybody that's on the team.
Just as a quick point of reference, once she's got that started, if you go to the #1 reference sheet, the intro and expectations, there are, for example, there are 4 YouTube videos that are referenced as a part of that are enjoyable to watch, that are real life examples of sustainability teams and companies and where it can take you. Normally we would show those as a part of the presentation, but we didn't have time. So if you're looking for something interesting as a good place to start and continue building that knowledge, take a stop there.
Well, thank you, Mac.
Yep. To all of you, congratulations. This can be an incredibly rewarding exercise. And please accept the thanks of Jesse, Mac, or Jesse, myself, and Peg. And please do feel free to contact us if there's more that we can do. We're not going away, and even though the engagement itself will be done, we welcome questions. And Maureen, Jesse will get back to you with the recorded version of the presentation today.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
I didn't misspeak, did I, Jesse?
Nope, not at all. It
Okay.
usually takes a little bit to initiate, but once I get the link, I will send it your way, Maureen.
Thank
So
you.
all the best to you, even though things are going to be very different this year. May you all have an incredibly wonderful Thanksgiving, however it is celebrated.
You too. Thanks, Mac.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Take care, everyone. Thanks.